How many shares of Twitter do you need to own to be able to retire in 2030? Let's find out. Of course, I am not a qualified financial advisor and nor am I a future teller. So please take this video with a pinch of salt. It's just a little bit of fun. And also note that we're going to have to make a fair few assumptions. I've made videos like this before and I really enjoyed making them, and I think you guys enjoy watching them as well. So we're back, let's do it again, but this time let's cover Twitter, which is a really topical stock at the moment. On the 25th of April, so not long ago at all, Elon Musk purchased Twitter for $44 billion. The first thing that we need to think about before we work out how many shares of Twitter we need is how much we actually require in order to retire. And this is really subjective, and I understand that everyone has different lifestyles and therefore different living costs. One person may live on £20,000 a year, another may require £40,000 a year, and someone else may have a lifestyle that requires £60,000 a year. And this all depends on lifestyle, housing costs, and even just where you live in the country. So because it's so subjective, we are just going to use the average living cost of someone in the UK. According to a source I found, the average living cost of somebody in the UK sits at £36,000 a year, which works out to be about £3,000 per month. So we'll go with that. But of course, living costs are not the same now as they were in 2012, and they're not going to be the same in 2030 either, because of our little friend inflation. So we need to account for that. According to this graph, the current rate of inflation in the UK sits at about 3%. I don't know if you believe that or not, but we're going to just call it 3% and move on with that. And obviously, we don't know what the inflation rate is going to be in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years time, so let's just call it 3%. So bearing in mind that inflation sits at 3%, our living costs that we've just thought about are actually going to be considerably higher when we retire in 2030. With our example of needing £36,000 a year or £3,000 a month to live on, with an inflation rate of 3% every year, you would actually need £46,000 a year in 2030, which is about £3,800 per month. This is of course assuming a 3% inflation rate per year between 2022 and 2030. But of course, if that is higher, the living cost in 2030 will be higher than the £46,000. Now we know how much we may need to live on, we need to work out how long we're actually going to be in retirement for. Again, I'm sorry, but I don't know how long you as the viewer are going to spend in your retirement. The average time in retirement in the UK is 16 years, but I'm guessing if you're spending your time watching finance content on YouTube, you probably want to retire a little bit earlier and you want to spend more than just 16 years in retirement. So let's round it up and we'll call it 30 years. So we need to work out how much money we need in our retirement pot to last us our entire retirement. Well, if we take the calculated annual living expenses that we calculated earlier of £46,000 and we multiply it by 30 years, because we said we're going to spend 30 years in retirement, we get £1,380,000. But we need to remember that if we're investing in Twitter stock may grow over those 8 years. And this is where it gets a little bit hard because we need to make some case scenarios for how Twitter stock might perform. For example, if we knew, and no one does know, that Twitter stock was going to grow by 10% each and every year between now and when we're looking to retire in 2030, then we would take this return, this growth, plus inflation into account, and we would adjust our £1,380,000 to reflect this. So if Twitter was going to match the S&P 500 and return an average of 8% per year, with inflation taken into account, so you would need $800,000 or this amount in British pounds to start you off in 2030. And then you would withdraw $60,000 or 46,000 British pounds every year for 30 years. And with a 7% return, I knocked 1% off the average return of the S&P 500 just to be a little bit safer and a little bit more conservative. It shows you that your retirement pot will last you 30 years and you'll even have $25,000 left over. This starting pot of nearly £700,000 is a lot less than that £1,380,000 that we mentioned earlier. And this is because your balance year on year keeps getting the benefit of compounding. If you were seriously planning your retirement, you would want to add a percentage of money onto the retirement pot that you're aiming for, just to allow and account for any mishaps or just any downturns in the market. Because what you don't want to do is plan to hit a certain figure and realize that 2 years of your lead up to retirement has been really bad and has not returned you anything, or you've had negative returns, and then you just have to add years on before you can actually retire. This video is just a bit of fun, but what we'll do is we'll add 25% on to account for any mishaps. So what we'll do is we'll call this amount that we need $1 million, or 795,000 British pounds. Of course, this has just been based on the S&P 500, so we need to think about whether we believe that Twitter stock will outperform or underperform the S&P 500 in the next 8 years leading up to 2030. And then we can calculate how many Twitter shares we would need to own. It turns out during my research that it's actually pretty hard to find analyst stock predictions that go all the way up to 2030. They tend to just halt at 2027. That sounds weird saying that, but I think that's because a lot of people think that Twitter will be a private company by that point. But anyway, I found a few sources that go up to 2027, and then I've had to get creative and extrapolate from there up to 2030. The first scenario is a bear scenario, and we're going to say that Twitter in 2030 will be worth $98.80 per share. For this one, I found an analyst prediction for 2027 at $83. And then I assumed a 6% growth per year from 2027 to 2030, which of course would be underperforming the S&P 500. So in order to have that $1 million invested, remember that we added 25% on to account for anything going wrong, you would need to have 10,121 shares of Twitter to be able to retire. And Twitter currently sits at about $49 per share. So this would cost you $495,951 to be able to buy the shares you need of Twitter to retire in 2030. So now we'll move on and we'll do an in-between bear and bull case. So let's call this the mid-bull case. Our mid-bull case is that Twitter is going to reach $111.53 per share in 2030. For this one, I used an article that said the price in 2027 will be $88.54 per share. And then I extrapolated from 2027 to 2030. And I assumed an 8% growth per year, just like the S&P 500. So you would need to own 8,966 shares of Twitter, which would cost you a grand total of $439,343 in today's money. And for my UK audience, please remember at this stage of the video, this is in dollars, so please remember to convert this money. And then we move on to our bull case, and this is where things start seeming a little bit more achievable. Our bull case is saying that the price per share in 2030 will be $268.73. I used an article which showed that analysts have forecasted a bull case high of $75 per share by 2023. So in just 1 year, they're expecting Twitter stock to go up by 53%. But I thought it was highly unlikely that Twitter stock will increase year on year by over 50% from now until 2030. So instead of that, I increased it every year by 20%. So you would need 3,721 shares, which would cost you $189,339 in today's money. I did find many sources that predicted that Twitter in 2030 price per share was going to be lower than my bear case. And I also found a lot of sources that predicted that in 2030, Twitter's price per share was going to be way higher than my bull case. So I'll open it up to you. Let me know your predictions of what Twitter stock will be worth in 2030 in the comments below. Remember, none of this is to be taken as a proper valuation, nor is it financial advice. I've had to make a lot of assumptions here, and remember, I've switched back and forth between dollars and pounds quite a lot in this video. But having said that, I really hope you enjoyed it. If you've liked this video, then I think you'll like these two right here.